It is 1:03 with our legislative subcommittee. Will the secretary take a roll call?
Thank you. Chairwoman Benton.
Here.
Member Connors.
Present.
Member DeSimone.
Present.
Executive Director Miguel. Legal Counsel Ray Archer. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So today we will be discussing and voting upon campaign finance and election legislation submitted by other persons and entities to the General Assembly. And then whatever is discussed today will be reported to the full board at 2 p.m. So, Mr. Director.
Good afternoon, members of the subcommittee. Our first bill to discuss today is House Bill 7664. This act would provide a process for local canvassing clerks to notify the State Board of Elections regarding patterns of forgery, would amend certain filing deadlines, filing dates to provide additional time to review and adjudicate challenges to nomination papers, and would amend the date of the primary election to ensure distribution of mail ballots overseas and allow additional time to adjudicate challenges. On January 6th, Secretary of State Greg Amore presented to the board an outline his office was proposing for moving the primary date in the timeline for nomination papers to be processed and approved. The proposal moves the primary to the last Tuesday in August, as well as provides additional time for candidates to gather signatures during the signature collection period, as well as an additional 4 days for this board to rule on objections to nomination papers for primary candidates, and an additional 10 days for general election candidates. It also requires the board to order a review of the nomination papers that include a consistent pattern of suspected forged signatures, notify other boards of canvassers as soon as feasible, and promulgate rules and regulations on nomination papers in consultation with the Elections Committee of the City and Town Clerks Association. At that meeting, the secretary indicated that legislation would be presented at a future board meeting. And before you today is that legislation. At that meeting on January 9th, board members had requested that the requirement that the rules and regulations for the processing of nomination papers be that required that they be promulgated under the Administrative Procedures Act, or the APA, be removed, as the board is exempt from that requirement. That provision was in fact removed from the legislation submitted to the General Assembly and is presented before you here today. The staff supports this piece of legislation.
Thank you. Miguel, does anyone have any questions about the bill?
So this would make it a bit easier for us to conduct our review since we now have more time. Is that correct? Or?
Correct. It gives the candidates more time to gather their signatures, so there isn't that pressure to acquire signatures quickly, and it does allow us more time to conduct the review.
And remind me, so part of this is what we worked on with the Secretary of State to put language specifically about notifications in case of forgery.
Correct. The staff here worked with the Secretary of State's staff in the Elections Division on the language in this bill.
Any other thoughts or questions? Or do we have no? Do we have a motion for?
I'd move support.
Great. We have a motion. Do you have a second?
I'll second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
The next bill is House Bill 7765. This bill would require that any group or other entity such as a nursing home, elder care facility that receives any governmental funding to conspicuously post a notice that political candidates or their agents are not permitted to solicit their residents or clients, and that political candidates or their agents are allowed to visit. However, the time and date of their visits would be maintained in a book by the facility. The staff has no position on this piece of legislation. I will note that the board staff is required under Rhode Island General Law 17-2014 to assign bipartisan pairs of officials to administer mail ballots to residents of these types of facilities. This proposal does not appear to impact that operation, as it only applies to political candidates or their organizations, not not those of us election officials who are administering the ballots.
I guess I have a question. I'm hoping someone has an answer for it. So basically, any entity, any building that has any type of governmental funding, local or state or federal. So is this an issue that we can even take care of? Like, is this something that the Board of Elections should be having a position on? I guess this, I don't know if this would be under our purview. That's the part of it. Because I think in your notes it talks about, we assign bipartisan pairs. Like, we do our due diligence already. So I think when it comes to signage, like, there's already government, like, parts of that prevent you from doing political work. So I don't know why that would, I don't know. Just a thought.
I might have missed it, Miguel, but did you say where this bill originated from?
This was not our proposal. This was presented by Representative Nardoni, independently of us on his own.
Does anyone have any thoughts, questions, or motion for the legislation?
I guess I'm just not sure what the bill means in this term of solicitation. So I mean, I think I agree with the staff that I would just agree to, let the bill go on its own without formal support. I'd like to also get if we are going to support it, I'd like to ask legal counsel to weigh in on the constitutionality.
Agreed.
Because for solicitation, I mean, other than a visit, some of the language in here, group, organization, association, it just, as far as I'm concerned, the language I think needs to be cleaned up on the bill a little bit. So I would move that we take no position, I guess.
I'll second that. I think the Board of Elections doesn't really have a place to be asking facilities to create policies.
Right.
It's not, that's not our function.
Yeah.
So I'll second that, taking no position.
So we have a first, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The next bill is House Bill 7766. This act would redefine political party and define and distinguish between major parties and minor parties based on the total number of votes a party's candidate received in a previous election. In summary, this proposal would reduce the percentage of votes cast required to become an officially recognized party from 5% to 2%. As you know, we have an agenda item later on in the meeting and in the next meeting where we have an entity who's seeking to seek recognition as a political party, and they fall under the current 5% rule. This would lower that percentage to 2%. And it also establishes a minimum number of registered voters to be required in that party as an alternate if that minimum percentage is not reached. So the way it seems to read to me is that even if a political party does not obtain that 2% in the general election, if they have over 5,000 registered voters on the rolls, they would continue to be recognized despite not achieving that 2% in the general election. From our perspective, the impact that this proposal could have is it could result in more frequent changes to the voter registration forms with that threshold being low to 2%. So voter registration forms and the online voter registration portal, agency systems would likely have to be changed potentially more frequently if that threshold is lowered, because you could in fact have more entities qualify as minor parties or officially recognized party. But that would be the impact from our perspective.
Does anyone have any comments, questions, motion?
And we had no position, the staff, on this.
Thank you so much, Doctor.
This is a question.
Of course.
Miguel, if this were to pass, I know you said that the voter registration and voter rolls would be require changes, is that something that if this passed, current staff would be able to handle?
Yes, because from, on our end, it would be the voter registration form, our primary responsibility, but we would also have to work with the Secretary of State's office, who manages the central voter registration system. And we would have to work with the Department of Motor Vehicles on changing their systems whenever a new party is recognized. But it's something that's not done very often, and we're going to determine how long that process is going to take after the next meeting, potentially. But it would be something that we would be able to do, yes.
And then do we know if the Secretary's office has any position on this bill at all?
They are not here. I do not know if they have a position or not, but we took no position on it from our point of view.
Thank you. Any other questions or motions?
I mean, I guess I'll move no position in accordance to staff recommendation.
So we have a motion to take no position. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
The next bill is House Bill 7847. This act would include political action committees that register with the Federal Election Commission within the definition of political action committees for the Rhode Island elections, and would increase the aggregate amount of a political action committee may contribute to a candidate, political action committee, or political party committee from $25,000 to $50,000. Rick Thornton, Director of Campaign Finance, is here to explain to the board the staff's position on this particular piece of legislation.
Thank you. Hi, Rick.
Hi, good afternoon. This bill is submitted, proposed by Representative Brian Newberry, independent of the Board of Elections. As Miguel summarized, the purpose of the act would include political action committees that are registered with the Federal Election Commission within the definition of political action committees for the Rhode Island elections. And it would also separately increase the aggregate amount a political action committee may contribute annually to a candidate, political action committee, and political party committees from $25,000 to $50,000. The one thing about the currently only individuals, political action committees that are registered in Rhode Island, and political parties that are registered in Rhode Island can contribute to candidates, political action committees, and political party committees. This proposal would include for PACs that are registered with the FEC. I see an issue with that in that currently the Rhode Island statute allows individuals to contribute a maximum of $2,000 to political action committees and candidates, whereas the federal limit is $5,000. And likewise, the amount of money that a political action committee can donate to candidates is $2,000, and the federal limit is also as higher at $5,000. The aggregate amount that a federal political action committee can donate to all candidates within a calendar year it does not have a limit. So Rhode Island does have a limit. So I think because of that inherent conflict, it would not be allowed to have a political action committee registered with the FEC to donate to candidates in Rhode Island. So for that reason, I would suggest the board oppose this legislation. Any questions on that?
So Rick, in order for this not to conflict, they would have to have a separate bill changing the existing law and just sort of revamping the whole situation. So
Yes.
That's the basis.
Right, and also there's a consideration if there's an existing federal PAC and they want to register in Rhode Island, all the money that's in the treasury of that PAC at the time they enter Rhode Island would be subject to the federal limits and therefore automatically be in violation of the Rhode Island limits. When we have inquiries from groups that want to enter Rhode Island that may also have a federal political action committee, we instruct them that they need to set up a separate Rhode Island PAC because of those differences in limits. And I understand sometimes it's a barrier from a federal entity registering as a political action committee in Rhode Island, but it is more restrictive than the federal limits.
Question. So I'm wondering, is this the first, I've never seen a bill like this before. Is this the first time?
This
that
is
we
the
have?
first time.
Yeah.
That's correct.
And so I'm wondering if, we've had a conversation with the representative about this conflict at all. Like, I know there hasn't been a hearing just yet, but.
There has not been. This bill is somewhat recently introduced, and
Oh,
again,
yeah,
I'm just
March.
giving my position to the board.
Okay. Any other questions or motions?
I mean, I would move to oppose, maybe with some indicator as to, what our opposition is in accordance with what Rick presented. And maybe we could send that over to the sponsor and tell him why we oppose rather.
Yeah, maybe
just
send
to
him
go
a letter
along with the
before
opposing.
the
Yeah.
hearing even happens so that he can have time to amend it if he'd
Right.
like to,
Or
or just
change
withdraw.
try to change the other statutes. I don't know that they're gonna
Okay.
be successful, but at least they could take the opportunity. So I'd move to oppose with that sort of condition, if you will.
I'll second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Rick. Next bill is House Bill 7848. This act would amend the current law so that it would no longer mandate, but rather simply allow local boards to conduct voter registration drives at high schools within the city or town. The staff took no position, as this has no impact on Board of Elections operations. We are required under a different statute to conduct voter registration at colleges and universities, but the high schools are under the requirement that they be conducted by the local boards of canvassers. So this would give the local boards of canvassers the option to do that at the high school rather than the mandate that they do that. Currently, we know that the current systems that have been implemented over the years, the online voter registration portal, for example, the automatic voter registration for high school students who obtain driver's licenses, they are captured there as well. So this again, we have no position on it because it wouldn't impact us, but we know that there are other methods of registration now that make it easier for high school students to register. So we just note that.
Any questions, comments?
I guess the presumption is that the cities and towns put this in as part of the package.
This is not from the City and Town Clerks
No.
Association. This is an
Yeah, I see.
independent.
I see.
That's right, yeah.
I see.
I was gonna ask if Nick had any position on that.
Do you want to address it by any chance? Just
That
give
would
us
be
some
great.
help on this.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. Nick Leamer, on behalf of the Rhode Island Town City Clerks Association. We have not discussed this legislation, nor have we taken a position on it. But I can speak generally in terms of what Cranston does for our voter registration drives at the high schools to follow the statute every year. It's a relatively simple process. Either myself or I'll delegate one of my staff members. We'll send an email out to the 3 high school principals in the city. We'll arrange a date. Usually we'll go by during the lunch period. And we'll try to do it towards the later part of spring so we can get the seniors who are older and juniors as well, but you could be 16 or 17 and register to vote, pre-register to vote. And it's not a great burden for us, certainly. And most towns only have one high school, so it's a couple of hours commitment. I can't speak for all the other towns, like I said, because we haven't discussed this, but this isn't something that's really on our radar.
So can I ask a question? So does the mandate doesn't tell you how many times a year you have to go. It just tells you have to do a drive. That's it.
Once a year.
I think it's
It is
annual.
once a year. So it's just once a year. Okay. It
And it's
puts
not a
an onus
burden.
in Providence, if anything, because it has so many high schools, but it's not. Okay. I actually sort of, I guess there's no position and that's fine. Part of me is concerned about that. Part of this is an accessibility thing. Yes, thankfully we have a lot of students are able to go to the DMV, but some people, including myself, didn't get their driver's licenses in high school. And so what does that say about access to being able to vote, especially as we're moving forward to, expanding that? So I think I may oppose it, but no position I'm okay with too. So I don't know. Other thoughts?
Well, based on the chair's feelings, I'll move to oppose.
Thank you. Do we have a
Okay.
second? Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The next bill is House Bill 7850. This act would establish Election Day as a day of special observance in Rhode Island. The act would also restrict the use of mail ballots in elections. Based on my review of the bill, this proposal would, in summary, reinstate the witness and notary requirement, require a reason to vote by mail, remove the ability to apply for a mail ballot online, eliminate the ability for military voters or voters with disabilities to return their ballot to the Board of Elections electronically, eliminate mail ballot drop boxes. The staff opposes this legislation. This is a difficult one for the staff because while we do recognize that instituting these changes is more lies in a policy. However, looking at it from an administration standpoint and the amount of fiscal resources that we've invested in the improvement of the security and election and efficiency of our mail ballot operations over the last 4 years, which have been significant, these changes would effectively nullify all of those investments that we've made and the state has made, as the number of mail ballots would be greatly reduced if this is implemented. So for that reason, the staff did choose to oppose this legislation.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Well, I have a little bit of a problem with the burden that that's gonna bring back to military and voters, but that would be my major problem with the legislation, but I'll defer it to the rest of the subcommittee as to how you want to handle it.
I think in addition to the fiscal burden that Miguel alluded to, it's actually restrictive and it's kind of,
Yeah.
Great.
it's caused too much of a burden for people to actually vote. We don't want to see that, so I'll move to oppose this.
I'll second the opposition.
Right. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The next bill is House Bill 8017. This is a joint resolution that would propose to the voters of the state a constitutional amendment which would provide that no person who is not a citizen of the United States to be allowed to vote in this state. The staff has no position on this. This does not impact our operations. However, we will note that it is already a requirement in order to register and vote in the state that you be a U.S. citizen, so.
I don't have a comment about this. That is a nice comment, so yes. Anyone else have any comments or motions on this legislation?
I mean, I'll move no position just because it's a constitutional amendment. Go from there.
I'll second.
Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
The last bill is House Bill 8046. This act would allow citizens of a city or town who are at least 16 years of age to register to vote and to vote in school committee elections in municipalities where school committees are elected entities. The staff has no position on this piece of legislation. However, I will note that if enacted, this bill would require that a separate ballot only containing the school committee contests be available at the polls. Because if an individual qualifying under this new rule, this new statute, they would need to be presented with a ballot only containing that contest in which they're eligible to vote, which in this case would be the school committee contest. But that is something that we could facilitate if necessary.
I think we saw this last year.
I was just gonna say
Yes.
that, yep.
I remember
seeing-
seeing
I'm
this.
looking
I
at it
remember
right
having
now.
a discussion
Yeah,
about
yeah, we
this
talked
last
about this, yeah.
Do you remember what the board's position was?
year. I don't actually.
I don't know. I think I think we might have had
I
no
remember what
position.
my position was, but
Yeah,
I don't
his
remember
position,
what,
yeah,
I
yeah.
was against this legislation,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I don't know what.
I was
the
in
board-
support of it, so I think
Yeah.
we might have
Yeah.
ended 2-2
I think
and
we
had
did.
no
I
position.
think we did.
Yeah. I think so.
I think we took no position. I think you're right.
Agreed. Yeah, because it's, again, there are,
I used to
Oh,
coach
yeah.
16-year-olds.
that's
don't
what,
think
that's
they-
what it was. Yes, there's
My-
logistical reasons around it too,
Right.
and so, yeah.
I just have concerns. You're making two classes of voters and, you have to make two ballots.
Yeah.
I'll move to take no position.
I'll second it.
All right, we have we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so no position, right?
No position.
Great.
And this concludes all of the bills on today's agenda.
Wonderful, thank you. So, do I have a motion to end our subcommittee meeting?
So moved.
So,
Oh, sorry, go
Are
ahead. Oh.
we're just going to adjourn this meeting and then do other ones as they come available, or do we need to do anything else, Miguel?
There may be several more, but we would have another subcommittee meeting if that were the
So we'll
case.
just adjourn, I guess.
Perfect.
A motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn, perfect.
Second.
All right, we have a second.
Aye.
Awesome, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you.
Was painless.
Which,
So last